Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Sparks of Ingenuity. I am carrying around my son right now, so if you hear him in the background, I apologize. But today I want to talk about something a little bit shift gears from what I've talked about my last couple of podcasts. My husband and I have been talking extensively for some time about moving into our own property, into our own home on our own property. But we've been, kicking around different ideas. Obviously, right now, it's really, really expensive to build. But all the properties we're looking at, the houses would need to be remodeled or something at some point. For the most part, I think there's one property that is an exception. But we would have to build other buildings onto the property for what we're hoping to do. And, because of that, we've kind of we're waiting and we're kicking around ideas and everything, but sometimes I go down the rabbit hole in my brain. I don't know if this is a me thing or if it's everyone gets this way sometimes, or if it's an anxiety thing or a writer thing or what. But I just go down the rabbit hole and start thinking about all the different possibilities and all the different aspects of trying to plan something. And, there's a lot involved with moving and building a house or remodeling a house. And you want to make sure that you're prepared for those things for the most part ahead of time. Obviously, I can't control everything that happens, but just being prepared is something that's, it's huge. And so I get that way about things sometimes. I go down a rabbit hole. But anyway, so I'm going over, thinking about this one night because I can't sleep and it's just going through my brain. So I'm got my phone and I'm looking at it and I'm like, man, if we have to build a house or, whatever, where are we going to stay in the meantime? Because I don't want to pay a ridiculous amount for rent on top of, this, that, or the other thing. And so I'm just kind of brainstorming. And my husband and I have talked a lot about getting a camper or an RV or whatever. And then, ultimately staying in that on our property so that we're just paying the down payments for the vehicle, and then afterwards, after living in it for a while, we can use it for camping and what have you, which is definitely a feasible option, and I see that for our family as an option. However, at the same time, I was well, I don't know if anyone else did this when they were younger, but in the summer, springtime, you go out to stores, and outside they have pre-built sheds that you can just buy off the lot. I don't know if that's common for everyone, but I definitely had that experience a lot as a kid. And you walk through them and you're like, this thing's huge. And I mean, being a kid, your perception is a little bit skewed. But I'm thinking about it and I'm like, man, tiny houses are a huge thing. But I wouldn't want to build a tiny home because that's upwards $50,000. I don't want to build a whole tiny home. I just want a tiny home for the time being that I can turn into a one-bedroom cabin for some of our, other uses, whether it's guests or we have a bunch of different plans for our property, which I may not get to all of that in this episode. It may go into the next episode as well. But, so we might be able to use this afterwards. Same concept. So then I'm what if, we get one of these pre-built sheds. They're a couple thousand. You can usually get them on really cheap payment plans. And then add in what we want. It can be kind of a test of what we can build on our own and what we can do. And then it's not our official home. So if we do something incorrectly or put in something wrong and it has to get fixed, it's a small space, an easy fix. We can take our time to do it whenever we can. And B, if we can do it and do it well and enjoy how it looks, etc., that's money we're saving on labor from contract workers on our home remodel or building situation. So I was like, this could be a great idea. So I'm looking up tiny houses. I think I mentioned this. I don't remember. My brain has been all over the place today and I just can't remember anything to save my life. But tiny houses average anywhere from 350 to 950 square feet. And it's me, my husband, and our son. And we, ideally, wouldn't have another child. I might be pregnant at that point, but we wouldn't have another child by the time that we are doing all this work and putting down a down payment and all of that jazz. So it'd just be the three of us living in this home. And that seems like, equitable space for a couple months. So, man, deep breaths. So I'm looking at it and I'm like, about a 20 by 20 shed, 400 feet, that seems doable. We've lived out of basically 2 bedrooms and a partial kitchen and living room at one point in time. We lived out of a bedroom and a bathroom. We were in a larger space, but all of our things were kind of condensed to that area. So we had the option for more space, but where we condensed our things to was small. And I feel like we could do it. So I'm like, okay, so I find this shed. We get like a pre-built shed, one of those like not super expensive construction, whatever. And then we make sure, this would obviously only be like a summer kind of cabin until we could put in some sort of insulation. But what we need at the time is like a summer cabin, because it should time out to when we would be able to start construction and everything. So, we put like a AC heating like wall unit. I don't know if we could find one, but I was like, okay, so we find something like a heating unit, AC unit, put it in the wall or something. So it's out of the way, but it still is, temperature controlled. And then I know you can get like the equivalent of like compostable toilets, and we could, do something like that where it goes in as like a small, tiny little toilet that we put in, and we either put a tank on the side or, we could try and hook up actual plumbing. And if we did like an actual plumbing situation, I know it would be a lot more expensive. But if we can make it almost like, an RV where it has the running water, it has the electricity, it has everything in unit, and then put like the compressors and all of the important like things that you need to run it. See, I have little experience, so I don't know if this would be possible, but we put that in like essentially like a shed on the back of the shed. And then you empty it or whatever you need to do based on what type of model and things that we have. And we put it all in like on the outside and then run everything to that outside, the generator and everything like that. So that, we can still have amenities, but also the cheaper versions to buy because, we're only going to be using it for a few months and then it'll only be used by guests and such. But then, if we want to do like a miniature but not mini, like tiny little cooler fridge, we could, find one of those, put a microwave oven in, maybe like essentially the equivalent of a camping like cooktop that doesn't get hot on the sides, so we could put it into like a counter situation on top of some drawers or something like that. So it'd have like the microwave oven, so it'd have the microwave toaster oven, there we go. So it's got like the microwave option, it's got the toaster oven option, it's got the oven option, and then we've got the stovetop so that we can have burners to cook things on. So make it like, a miniature kitchen, put in a sink, obviously do lighting throughout, a small bathroom with like a smaller stand-up shower, again, like you find in like RVs and such, and toilet. Then do like a bunking area, maybe do like an upper bunk bed with like a queen or king mattress on top, and below do some sort of seating area. And then depending upon the space and the size of like the shed thing that we get, we can do either a secondary seating area, a dining table area, a table that converts to a bed type of thing, or we can do bunks against the wall. Obviously, I'd have to look at a lot more inspiration to know exactly what to do. But I'm like, I feel like, this is stuff that we can try and attempt to do on our own. And if it doesn't work out, again, we can know, okay, great, we can't do this stuff in our own house. But if it does work out, we've got lots of options and we've got experience. And I just think it would be so cool to have this experience. I've never I don't want to commit to a tiny house or like converting a bus or, anything like that, because I'm not going to be honest here, I want like 10 kids, so that doesn't really work well, and I'm just not a fan of small spaces for long term. But the idea of living in just like a quaint, tiny little house for a short time and having the ability to like vacation there in a way. At other times, sounds great to me. So I'm thinking about this and I'm like, okay, how feasible would this be? Would it be cheaper because I'm looking up like different kinds of sheds where you can get them from, whatever. And lumber is ridiculously priced right now. So it's more expensive than, it would have been in the past. But I'm going through and I'm thinking and like, as I'm seeing numbers, I'm like, okay, maybe it'll be just cheaper to get a fifth wheel. And I'm looking at fifth wheel prices, and I didn't do extensive research on the fifth wheels, but they're like, for one that's not so old that it smells like socks and mildew, which I really wouldn't be a fan of because I'd eventually want to remodel it anyway, and that's more money that I'm putting into it. And those ones, the ones that smell like socks and mildew and whatever, they're basically the price of 2 sheds. That are in the size that I'm looking for. So I feel like we could get the shed, essentially they'd even out in price, if not be a little cheaper than a fifth wheel that's a decent size that we're like looking for, that we'd actually end up using or what have you. So I'm like, okay. And this way, we can put like an actual mattress in it. It'll be like a stable home. We'll feel like we're in a home, even though it's not our home. And I think it'd just be so cool. And then again, as I mentioned, we could use it as like either a cabin for guests, or my husband and I really want to pursue a business venture on our property. We're looking for a property with a barn. We'd like to convert it to an event space. That's currently a really popular thing, but we also have a lot of family that they all really like to be involved in our lives, which is great, except nobody has a space big enough to hold everyone for an event. And scheduling that out to rent a place is just A, a waste of money, and B, difficult to do. So we're like, if we have this event space, then we can just be like, yep, we're holding this event. Everyone can come. If you don't come, that's on you. And I work in the wedding industry, and I would really love to be able to offer my wedding planning services along with this venue. So then we're like, well, besides the venue, we'd like to have some sort of bunkhouse for at least the bride and groom to stay there, because we know inevitably we'll be a little out of the way. And even though if there's like a hotel nearby, it'd just be nice to have something for bride and groom to use themselves the night of the wedding. We intend to be pretty cheap with what our venue costs, and then everything else is an add-on. So the packages that the bride and groom choose they're getting exactly what they want, and they're saving money on the things that they don't want, instead of just providing a blanket package and not really giving them what they're looking for, but adding all this stuff that they may or may not want. And for that use, after we move into our house, we'd have this cabin that could be that, either like essentially the honeymoon suite. So, somebody could have it the night before the wedding, night after the wedding, bride and groom can have it if they want to rent it out for a couple of days. Like, we could have varying different options, and then just from there be able to, choose what to do with it. I'm kind of running out of time for today's podcast, so I'm going to pause there, but I will be talking about this idea and concept a little bit more on my next podcast. So I will see you on Wednesday. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.